I generally go for records, so my record for sending people to sleep in an audience of 20 people is 4 in a talk. So, we can either go for that one, or me try and do this talk, which is probably 5 minutes worth in 3.5 minutes. Okay, so if I can aim for 3.5 minutes, that's what I will do. Otherwise, we'll just go for getting it done within the 4. Okay, feel free to start counting down any time from 30. All right. Okay, go. A doctor picks up his pen to write the story of a man who has turned his world upside down, a man whose life has changed history. The first part of Dr. Luke's account, the Gospel or Good News, focuses on Jesus' life, death and resurrection. The second part, Acts, traces the impact of those remarkable first century events on the whole region as communities of Jesus' followers spring up around the Mediterranean. Luke Acts was written between AD 60 and 70. Luke emphasizes, I have carefully investigated everything from the beginning, his aim, so that you may know more certainly the things that you have been taught. Luke was an eyewitness to some of what he writes in Acts as he travelled with Paul. Journeys he describes in the second volume of his account archaeologically prove him to be an accurate historian. The book of Luke is one of 4 Gospels. Luke, the non-Jewish doctor, shows us Jesus as the perfect human being rather than the King of the Jews, portrayed by Matthew, the suffering servant, emphasized by Mark, or the Holy Son of God, revealed by John. Through Luke's eyes, we see that Jesus as a compassionate friend of ordinary men and women, a man to be followed. In keeping with this perspective, Luke writes not of kings or wise men visiting the newborn Jesus in Bethlehem, shepherds, rough working men, come under Luke's spotlight. They were probably the shepherds tending the lambs used in nearby Jerusalem for temple sacrifices for the forgiveness of sin. Here, they are invited to witness the birth of one whose death would be described as a once-for-all sacrifice, making it possible for everyone's wrongdoings and shortcomings to be forgiven. Luke sets this amazing story in its historical and geographical context, beginning in the time of Herod, king of Judea, but his narrative is part of a much bigger story of God's love for humanity. Love that was rejected, love that persevered, love that continued unconditionally, and as Luke takes up the story, love that is expressed in human form. The story of Jesus is part of God's bigger story, a rescue plan for a broken world. That's where we fit in to this epic narrative. Luke invites us to discover who Jesus is and to become his followers, playing our part in the ongoing drama. Luke's gospel shows Jesus to be someone who is from a poor family, who knows what it is to be hungry, sad, let down by his family and friends. He identifies with the lowest members of society, giving status to outcasts, women and children. Luke frequently notes Jesus' life of prayer together and his teaching. Meals are also significant. Jesus ate with 2 very different groups of people, Pharisees and teachers of the law who wanted to catch him out and condemn him, and tax collectors or sinners who were keen to hear what he had to say. Joy permeates Luke's gospel. Joy is mentioned 12 times, and being filled with joy in the Holy Spirit was an expectation of the early church. Luke emphasizes the key place of the Holy Spirit in the Nativity and throughout the Gospel and Acts. Jesus' miracles back up the supernatural perspective, bringing Jesus' first followers and us today to Jesus' key question, who do you say I am? There are 2 key characters, Peter and Paul, in the story of Acts, but the main player is God's Holy Spirit. Under the direction of the Holy Spirit, the church becomes a global community, crossing national boundaries and the divisions between male and female, slave-free and Jew and Gentile. The first volume, the book of Luke, starts with an introduction setting out Luke's aims and then divides into 3 sections. Jesus' life and work in Galilee, Jesus' journey to Jerusalem, Jesus' death and resurrection. The second volume, the book of Acts, has 6 parts. The new community of Jesus' followers is established in Jerusalem. The community expands to the rest of Palestine. Gentiles are included in the community. The message spreads to the Roman province of Asia. The message spreads to Europe. The community reaches Rome and the highest levels of society. And God's invitation is extended to all nations.